And this is our membership meeting, and we have a speaker tonight, Mike Carlson. And in fact, it's Dr. Mike Carlson. His family came here about 1960, and he joined the Brunswick school. I went to school with Mike. And what I remember about Mike is he was in the band. And he was in the percussion system.
You got a good memory.
And the big thing I remember him about is when the band did the Overture to 1812, which is basically about percussion. Very complicated piece. And I played the trumpet, but I used to look over there at Mike. And during the percussion part of that piece, he was just going like crazy, and they were shooting off, shot off fireworks or something, but he was really good. He was in the Brunswick High School class of 1966, and he went on to get his doctoral degree. What's it in?
Educational administration.
Educational administration, which was very appropriate because he became an award-winning teacher and a school administrator and the superintendent of Highland Schools. He's also a member of the Brunswick High School Distinguished Alumni Hall of Fame. And he's been a longtime community servant. He's still working with Carlson's Funeral Homes. And we're glad to have him here. He's going to talk about his Brunswick experience.
Nola mentioned the band. I'll tell you a story. I played football, and the band director's name was Albert Sega. Some of you are going to remember that. And as a freshman, I could be in the band, but when it got to be a sophomore, I was playing on the varsity football team. And I asked him if I could play football and at halftime go in the band. It made perfect sense to me. He didn't think so. So that was the end of my band career, right there. Family came here in the early 60s. What a difference in this town over the years. Most of the people who were here then, excuse me, I've got a cold, worked at Chevy or Ford. And the houses were slab houses that Al Wolf built back in those days, down across from the Hickory Ridge place down there. And the one aspect that I tell people that they don't believe me is that Hadcock Road used to be a stone road. Not a little stone road, but a big stone road. And lots of things changed. When we came here, there wasn't another funeral home in town. And I was the oldest, I am the oldest of 7, 3 of which have passed away, including my sister this week. And we didn't have enough money once we started to do anything, so Dad worked at MTD in Dodge City, drove school bus, and he worked for Carl Zimmerman delivering milk because he had a store on the corner of 303 and 42. And the world was different then. I'm not sure that it was better, but I'm not sure it was worse either. I used to be able to walk back and forth. One summer I left education and I sold cars for Frank White Ford, which was across the street from the funeral home. And you used to be able to walk back and forth between the funeral home and the Ford dealership, and you wouldn't see a car for 10 minutes. Now it takes 10 minutes to get out of the lot of the funeral home and turn one way or the other. My whole family for the most part has been involved in trying to make Brunswick and Medina County better. I was on the Brunswick School Board during tough times. And matter of fact, I was on the Traffic Commission when they started to turn right on red. That sign was put up when I was on the Traffic Commission. When I was on the Brunswick Board, I was also on the Career Center Board for a number of years. Ralph Berry, some of you may remember, used to be a county commissioner. And along the way, Medina County Drug Abuse Commission, McDAC, came into play. It was wise on the part of the citizens of Medina County to decide to put some tax money into not only drug enforcement, but treatment and education. And it was quite an experience, because in order to try to decide where to put the money, we had to interview all the policemen and the educators and all of those involved in it. And some things have changed over time and others haven't. A lot of people were resistant to change because they didn't want to give up their little pond of authority. And that's still the case in many ways. You know, I live most of my time now in Garrettsville, and it's got a little fire department here, and a little fire department there, and a little police department here. And it probably makes more sense to put them together, but that's not going to happen. The schools made a great decision to back the sales tax, because that sales tax has built schools in this county, particularly in Cloverleaf, and I think one in Brunswick too, without a bond issue, because they were good stewards of the money. They couldn't use it for salaries or benefits. It had to be used for capital expenditures. Capital expenditures are anything that has a lifespan of over 5 years or more. I started out teaching 5th and 6th grade reading, and probably had the most fun there. I really did. I'm still very good friends. Kenny and I meet once a month and have for 50 years. And I started Sarrar Elementary, then I went to the Chapman Elementary, which is on Drake Road. And I got a call, and the call was from Homer Smith. Homer said, "Do you still want to be a principal?" I said, "Sure." Well, it turned out Highland Middle School had an opening for a principal. 700 kids and me. And I was a ripe old 26. So I spent 3 years as a middle school principal. And then the superintendent left. The assistant, who was place I took as a principal, became a superintendent. I was at assistant superintendent at 29, and he left, and I was a superintendent at 32. And there was a very contentious school board race, to say the least. And I was there for 3 years, and I left. And during that time, when I was at Hiram College, I worked at a funeral home in Garrettsville. We didn't have any money. I needed the money. So I worked there, and when I left Highland, I got a call from a mutual friend who was a minister, and he said, "Don wants to talk to you." And Don was the owner of the funeral home. His wife's name was Hazel. Hazel has serious arthritis, and they need to move to a dry climate. So we bought the Garrettsville Funeral Home 36 years ago. Garrettsville reminded me a lot of where I grew up, a little town in northwest Ohio called Sherwood. Great little town. 700 people, asphalted streets, sidewalks, a swimming pool, and a lighted baseball field. Not a bad place to grow up. When I was in Brunswick, I was in athletics. I am in the Brunswick Athletic Hall of Fame, and I'm in the Medina County Hall of Fame, athletically. I know it doesn't look it, but played football for 3 years, basketball forever, and I ran track 1 year. And I'm not even sure why I did it, but I did. They needed somebody to jump over the high bar, and I did. So athletically, I had a lot of fun. I did. And every now and then, when I was a school superintendent, the discussion would come up why we needed athletics. And athletics teach a lot. It's not just fun and games. It makes people, in my opinion, better community members. Because it forms a sense of community. Anyhow, I bought the funeral home in Garrettsville, and I got a call one night from the president of the Highland School Board, who said that the superintendent who left after me, they called and said, we want you to apply for the position. I said, I'm not going to do that. And some of you have been around for a while know it was a really contentious time. It was. It was very difficult. We had school board members back then in Highland who had white gloves, and they would go along the hall with their. Yeah, it was. We had a wrestling coach who didn't get the head job when he thought he should, and he wanted to have wrestling practice on Christmas Eve and Christmas, and I said no. So they called the school attorney, and he said, "Give him the keys," which I did. But it was very difficult. Anyway, I told him, you should interview people, decide who you want, talk to them. I'm happy to come and meet with them, but I'm not really interested in making a change now. But I love Highland. I still do. I said, if something happens, you don't get along, whatever, give me a call, I'll come and talk to you. They did, the next day. So I did go back, and I was back for 10 years. And it was a good time because Highland's academic standing is still significant. It wasn't when I went there. I tell people, when I went there, the kids in the middle school, their textbooks didn't even have us landing on the moon yet. So they were behind big time. So I stayed there for the whole 10 years I was there. And I had some neck surgery, and it was time to change career paths. So that's when I went back into the funeral business with my father, who was retired at that point, my brother Pat, who many of you know. I had two other brothers, Neil and Sean. They were the two youngest. Sean died at 50, Neil died at 54? 57. So, none of my kids were interested, nor Pat's. I think they figured out the hours sucked and the pay wasn't what everybody thought it was. You gotta have a big car, right? Well, yeah, unless you want me to drive a Yugo for a lead car, which nobody wants. And 3 o'clock in the morning when the phone rings, you get up. That really hasn't changed. Brunswick's changed. Oh my goodness, has it changed. I think the largest population of a Catholic church in the Diocese of Cleveland is now St. Ambrose. At one time, they had over 200 organizations internally that people could join and be part of. And we're very blessed here because you've got St. Ambrose, St. Martin's in Valley City, Holy Martyrs, St. Francis, Sacred Heart in Wadsworth, And out in Portage County, where I'm spending most of my time now, they just closed churches. They have 4 churches now with 1 pastor and a vicar, which is an assistant. So, and that was a big change. And Brunswick was a big change. The community grew and grew in good ways, I think. I'm proud to be from Brunswick. I was when it was Brunstucky. I still loved it. And I do to this day, because it has a lot to offer. There's reasons why living here is good. The social services are good. The library system's fabulous. You've got the recreation, you've got the schools. Even the junior high now, or I think it's a junior high.
Middle school.
They have their own football field, a first class one. We were on dirt in the back. That was my high school. It has changed significantly. It really has, and I think in many ways all for good. I don't know that I would have preferred to grow up anyplace else. Everything changed over the years. It just did. But it was all good change. The county was good change. Family's been involved in lots of things over the years. I did a lot of things. I was on Creative Housing's board for 13 years. 7 or 8 of them, I think I was the president. I was on a number of other boards.
Rotary?
Yeah, I still am there. That's 26 years. That's so hard to say sometimes. I get up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, what the hell happened? It just, life changes, it does. And fortunately, I've had good relationships with people over the years who've been supportive, not only from a personal perspective, but also from a business perspective. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. No use talking more about me unless you ask.
How about your children?
Kelly, my daughter, I have 2, a boy and a girl. Kelly is an assistant dean at Southern New Hampshire University.
Where?
Southern New Hampshire, the one on TV with the bus. She does that online. Carrie Gump, they went to school together. And Carrie is now working for a contractor. He retired as a major in the Marines. He's got the clearances, so he does work for them. My son Brad is a diplomatic security service agent who now is in Albania and is responsible for the security at the embassy. His wife is a consular officer at their embassy. They have been to the Philippines. They were in Israel. There's another one in between there. But they're a tandem couple. So wherever one goes, the other can go. They have 2 girls. Adelaide is 10 and Dorothy's 8. Nola.
What would you say to the kids nowadays, future kids on this tape, about the importance of community service? And also, what would you say to our organization on how do we promote community service in the community?
You know, I have been chagrined at the lack of history in our schools now. The curriculum has changed. And I have believed in the fact that you can't know where you go, where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And I think that's important. It's important for your group. Because you can look back and I can make funny stories about stone roads, but those stone roads built this place. And just dismissing that isn't right, because it is important. I speak at a lot of different events for opening or closing with a prayer. And one component that I always include is to remind us to be givers and not takers. And if you don't give back to where you're at, then you're going to get what you got. If you want to make it better, give. Not just, it isn't money, but it's time and talents in addition to treasure. Go.
You mentioned Hadcock Road. Prior to you coming, it used to be Cider Mill Road.
Now that I didn't even know.
It was Cider Mill. I'm struggling to remember the family that lived at the north end of it before Grafton. There was a farm there.
Scarlett's?
That might
Scarlett's?
be correct.
No.
No?
The Fullers were at the other end.
Yeah.
Gary's mom and dad were at the
Mm-hmm.
center end of it.
Carter's lived there.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the cider mill for the area.
Greg always said that they went to church in the auditorium at the school, and the altar was set up, but behind the altar was the Blue Devils sign.
That's the truth too. St. Ambrose used to be in the basement of the school, and St. Colette, when they started, was in the gym at Crestview. So it's not that way anymore, but it was.
Gary and I were married in that basement at St. Ambrose.
Yeah, so was I.
And I used to usher there years ago. Jack Coyne would always go up and grab the knot of my tie and straighten it up every year, every time I saw him.
Tell them who was on that team for basketball.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I will tell you a story. It was a lot of fun. I look back on that. We really had a good basketball team my senior year. And
One of the best.
we did,
ever.
yeah. And we got to the district finals at Valley Forge in Parma. And signs on the whole side of the bleachers were, "Here come the farmers." You know, be careful, they're driving tractors.
Strongsville's still saying that.
It was the truth. I mean, it was crazy. And Valley Forge had a good team. They had a really good player who went on to college. But Rick Robbie, Reese Jarrell, Tom Beachy,
John Casley.
yeah, Fred Benko.
Oh, Fred Banko.
Was Rumbaugh still there?
Oh, yeah.
Who?
Paul Rumbaugh?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rumbaugh was before me, so was
Right.
Snyder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked up to them because they were, I think, a year or two ahead of me. But we really had a good team. We had a lot of fun.
Did you win at Valley Forge or not?
We did.
Oh, right.
That made it even better. Then we lost to Cathedral Latin at Baldwin Wallace. It was like playing against 5 men. I swear those guys were 25 years old. But it was a good experience. It really was. It was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Did you have winning football teams?
You know, it was different then. We were part of a different league. Orville was part of it.
Wow.
And boy, they used to kick our butts all the time. Wadsworth still was. It was different. It was different. John Castley was on that team.
Yeah.
Rick Adamkowitz was on that team. Ronnie Chimicella. Greg Brooks was on that team. Yeah, we had,
We were lucky. We had a lot, and growing up at that time, we had a lot of fun with athletics.
yes, we did. It was a big part of what we were doing.
I agree.
But
It
not
really
for
was.
girls. But not for girls.
They didn't have it then. It just wasn't part of
We're
what.
cheerleaders.
Yeah, and it wasn't, they didn't have the same things back then. And you could do more back then. I was in plays
Yeah?
when I was in school. I look back on that and they look at me and said, "You were in a play?" Yeah, I was. It was just all encompassing. I mean, it's what you did. There weren't as many distractions. You didn't have phones. You didn't have a lot of things that they have now that occupy their time. They just didn't. Cell phones were non-existent. I tell people all the time, I had a service a week or so ago for a lady out in Garrettsville, who was 104, and I was the minister. And I said, can you imagine what she lived through? She lived through depressions. She lived through Model T Fords into what we have now. I always remember the Jetsons, because they had to, on their wrist, for those of you that are old enough, they had a wrist thing that they had. Well, now everybody's got them on their wrist. You don't even need a phone. The phone or the watch can do it for you. And I said, can you imagine, live through a depression, live through 3 wars, 4 wars, 5 wars, counting all the other ones that were out there. And that lady still had a smile on her face whenever you saw her, and every day was a good day. And I try to make sure that I live that way too, and that's important. So, anything else?
Good time to grow up.
Yes, it was. We didn't have the same distractions. You know that. We didn't. Biggest distraction was, where were you going on Friday or Saturday? That was a big
There
distraction.
were no sidewalks and there was no rec center and there were no.
None of that. Nope, none of
No
it.
lights on the street.
Nope, there weren't.
I don't know if you were aware of the story a long time ago that gave me a few days of grief because of your father, but it really wasn't his fault.
This ought to be good.
But we had a good time with it between him and I every time we saw each other. I had sold a car and took the plates off. My dad had got another car from a friend, fixed it all up, and I said, Dad, I'll just put my plates on that car and register it, and it's yours, which they did. But something wasn't right with that car one time, so he fixed it and decided to take a drive up Minor Drive and into town, and decided to turn around in Carlson's funeral home and head back. And everything was fine. But that night, before that, was a killing down here at the body shop. And the story as I understood it, somebody called the funeral home and said, we're gonna blow up that place because of that body being there. And so it just happens the night my dad drives through, they get his license plate number, and all of a sudden the sheriff is calling me, could you come in and talk to us? And I says, I'm on the phone, what do you want to talk about? No, we'd like you to come in. Well, I don't think I want to come in, you gotta tell me what you're talking about. My younger brother Gary was a deputy, so I hid out for 2 days, trying to figure out what is going on. So I let my brother take me in, and they started questioning me about that killing and that threat to Carlson's. And I says, I don't know anything about it. Well, you got a 65 Chevrolet car, don't you? I says, no, I never had a 65 Chevrolet. Well, he gets on the phone and calls registration. Yep, sure enough, he's got a 65 Corvette. Well, that's not a Chevrolet, it's a Corvette. That'd be like calling a cow a puppy. It's different. So sure enough, yes, I had it. But my dad was driving it, and he just happened to drive through, and that's the license number they got. Ended up, I had to go to Richfield and take a lie detector test over that killing.
Oh, that's scary, wow.
So watch yourself.
Don't drive around Carlson.
Yeah. That reminds me, we had one tornado, and it came through right by the funeral home. Took the roof off.
1965.
Yep, took a roof off the one side of the funeral home. I'd forgotten about that. Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate it very much. Good to see you. Thank you.